Good evening and welcome to another weekly edition of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I am Ryan Roberts and these are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Miss Shelley Pruitt. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing good. No, I just had to say that I hope all our Texas peeps appreciate the end of that opener, deep in the heart of Texas.
Man, we sucked at that, didn't we?
We did.
We can do better. We can do better. One more time. Deep in the heart of Texas.
We're so horrible.
Damn.
Go on with the fabulous story.
So, as you can tell by tonight, we are talking UFOs, and I want to thank Miss Linda Hillard for my wonderful shirt that I got this weekend for my birthday. Even though Roswell is in New Mexico,
I was about to say, man, you're a little off there.
I had to wear my UFO shirt tonight, so I greatly appreciate it.
Me and Shelley went with straight black, so just, that's typical.
Hey man, everything I own is black, but has logos on it. Well, except for a couple of things. But anyway, so tonight we are talking about UFOs over Texas. Now, I know that we have, at least I've seen a UFO, and we've seen them in other states. Blake, you've seen a UFO over Texas. Shelley, have you ever seen a UFO over Texas?
No. I have seen what I thought was one when we were in Kansas because it was just a sudden bright light. And because I had kind of gone off on myself, and it was like this great big bright light that I saw all of a sudden, and I flipped around and going, did anybody else see that? And, the kind and wonderful Rupert came over, and he was like, let's concentrate and let's look. And so I'm like, I was trying hard, and we didn't see it again. And he goes, it must have been meant only for you. And I'm thinking, lucky me, I'm going, yay. Does that mean they're going to come in my bedroom and stuff? Because I ain't down with keep the alien kink somewhere else. I ain't shaming if you're into that, but I'm not. So.
Well, I am actually kind of surprised that you haven't seen one because you do live out in the middle of the country. So you've got a big old sky you can see all over the place. So.
And it's very dark.
It is. It's very dark out there.
Well, the ones that I've seen is interesting that you say that. On the contrary, the ones that I've seen have been over a larger city.
Yeah, same for me.
Interesting.
But we do know that Texas UFO sightings go back kind of far. And tonight we're going to discuss some of the sightings leading up into the 80s where there was like a really, really insane sighting. So we'll go ahead and get started and jump into the story. So Texas is a vast and beautiful state that stretches from the piney woods of the east to the deserts of the west. And when they say the stars at night are big and bright, they mean it. Y'all clap.
It's a Texas thing. If you're not from Texas, you don't understand. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for anybody
bad.
of our
bad Texans
of our fellow countrymen and overseas international audience that listening.
Sorry.
We're sorry. It is a Texas thing. They have us trained well.
Bad Texans, I swear. You can't hit the beat. So the expansive sky covers large swaths of land. And if you look up at the night sky, you may catch a glimpse of a shooting star or a satellite streaking across the starry expanse. Or you may see something else altogether, possibly a craft from another world. And it may make its presence known, like it did for so many Texans in the past, living their lives in the Lone Star State. Now, believe it or not, Texas has a deep history of UFO encounters that date back a lot further than most people would realize, running all the way back to the 1800s. Now, Bonham, Texas was the first to experience a run-in with aerial phenomenon that no one could explain, dating all the way back to the summer of 1873. An unidentified object showed up in the Bonham sky in the middle of the day and terrorized the citizens of the small Texas town. An oval or cigar-shaped object appeared in the sky on the edge of town that summer afternoon. And many of the town citizens stepped out into the street to get a better look at what darkened their skies. And as they did, the massive strange object suddenly flew towards town at a blistering pace, scaring the bejesus out of all the townsfolk.
Not the bejesus.
The absolute bejesus. Very few brave souls stayed in the street and observed the object flying, while many townspeople decided it was too much for them and ran inside. And several men actually dove for cover under their covered wagons as the object circled the small town twice. And then, just like that, it shot away from the town and disappeared, leaving the residents of Bonham in a state of confusion. And it didn't help matters either when a paper in Kansas reported a similar incident with a similar craft just 24 hours later.
Oh.
The residents of Bonham were now even more confused and left scratching their heads. No one knew what they had seen, and it defied all logic and the laws of what was possible. Given their limited to no aviation capabilities, nobody had any answers, and none ever came. But about 5 years later, another small Texas town would have a brush with something that seemed to be outside the understanding of what was possible.
Okay, hold on, wait, back up. We'll pause real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Bonham is, this is how large Texas is, by the way, for those who don't live here. Bonham's in North Texas, right?
I believe it is. Yeah, I think it's like close to Dallas.
It's like on the other side of like the western side of DFW area, correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yes, you're going to go through Bonham, right, just past Sherman, right in that area. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty close. It is pretty close to the Oklahoma line, if I'm not mistaken. So
very close.
I knew it was somewhere in North Texas, but that's just how big Texas is for you people.
I drive through Bonham to come and see you, Blake. Remember?
Yeah, that's right. That's what I thought. That's what's there. Okay, so not west, north, whatever. I'm getting my cities all mixed up. It's all good.
Northeast Texas.
I'm a horrible Texan.
Look at me knowing logistics.
I failed geography, so it is what it is. This is going to be a fun night.
You know, and weirdly enough, as we go along, you'll see a lot of these sightings take place in either North or East Texas. Not a whole lot in Central or West that I found. I did find some, but not a whole lot. So, but about 5 years later, another small Texas town would have a brush with something that seemed to be outside of the understanding of what was possible. Just outside of Denison, Texas, on January the 22nd, 1878, a Mr. John Martin had gotten up early that morning and decided he was going to go hunting. And while he was out traipsing around in the nature that morning, he happened to look up in the sky where he noticed an object coming towards him from the south, moving at a peculiar speed. At first, it was far away and looked almost like an orange. But as it got closer, it seemed to grow in size and change in shape. And as the object passed over him, he was able to get a good look and said it looked like a large saucer. Which is very interesting because this is actually the first, because everybody thinks Kenneth Arnold is the first time a UFO sighting is talked about as being a saucer. This is actually the first one on record where someone said it looked like a saucer flying over them. So he watched as the object continued on its flight path and flew out of its line of sight. He didn't know what he had seen. Flew out of his line of sight, I'm sorry. He didn't know what he had seen, and to the best of his knowledge, thought it maybe could have been a balloon or something of that nature. But he wasn't entirely convinced. Nothing like that object was in production at the time. Specifically, nothing that moved like that. When telling his story to the paper, Mr. Martin went on the record and said, quote, "If it wasn't a balloon, scientists really need to look into it." However, no scientists ever did. And after his sighting, very little is mentioned about UFOs over the Lone Star State until one of the most famous Texas UFO cases occurred in the little town of Aurora,
which
on
is
April the 17th.
35 minutes from me.
35 minutes from you. Now, and Bonham and Denison are pretty close together too, right, Shelley?
Yes, because you actually will go Sherman, Denison, Bonham, same area.
It's kind of interesting that all that kind of starts around that area.
And then Aurora, I'll take you to it. Y'all come see me. I'll take you to it. I'll show you where Ned's grave is alleged to be.
You know, I still need to go. I've never been. I need to go check it out.
Come on.
But so it occurred in the little town of Aurora on April the 17th, 1897. Now, if you remember a couple of summers ago, we had Daniel Allen Jones on the show, and he spoke about the Aurora incident. And as a friend of the legendary Jim Mars, he's carried the torch of, talking about the Aurora incident. And if you want to hear an in-depth interview on the subject, I highly recommend going back and listening to Daniel Allen Jones's episode. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But for those who don't know, on the morning of April 17th, 1897, at about 6 a.m., the townspeople of Aurora, Texas, saw a cigar-shaped craft that they referred to as an airship. As they watched, they noticed that it seemed to be having some kind of technical problem. And as it flew to the north, it began to descend rapidly from the sky. When it got to the north end of town, it approached Judge Proctor's property. And on Judge Proctor's property was a large windmill, And the failing craft was on a direct collision course with that said windmill, when suddenly, bang, the airship smacked the windmill and exploded.
I love your, sound effects there, Ryan.
I gotta see if you're awake. The airship smacked the windmill and exploded, shooting debris from the windmill and the ship over several acres, which also destroyed a water tank and Judge Proctor's poor little flower bed. The astonished residents ran to the scene of the crash to see what they could see and to take stock of the damage caused by the wayward craft. But when they got to the site, they couldn't believe their eyes. Amongst the wreckage and smoldering debris was a body. The townspeople thought that it had to be the pilot, but the body was badly disfigured. However, there were enough of the remains to determine that the pilot was not human.
And they did call him the pilot.
They did call him the pilot. They didn't know who or what he was, honestly. The whole incident was so strange that no one could figure it out. Where was this flying machine from? And they couldn't even figure out where the pilot was from, let alone the flying machine. So a Mr. T.J. Weems stepped forward and suggested that the pilot of the ship and the ship itself came from Mars. The townspeople couldn't think of any better explanation, so they just kind of went with it. And they began to search the pilot's strange body for any clues of his exact origin. And when they searched his body, what?
Sorry, it's just like I don't know. I guess because I was like raised in a family of men that worked on land and stuff. I could just see my family members out there like, well, I don't know. Don't look like nothing from around these parts.
Hat in hand.
That must be from Mars.
Hat in hand, poor little feller.
That's just what went through my head.
Laughing, but they're really pretty accurate.
That is how my people sound, okay? Like, just ain't from around these parts.
Poor little feller never stood a chance.
Exactly.
Now, on this mysterious pilot's person, they found a series of papers written what can only be described as hieroglyphs that no one could decipher. So what it said is completely lost to history. And not making any headway on the pilot's origin, the town people began to pick up the debris and clean up Judge Proctor's property because he was pretty pissed off that something happened to his windmill.
Yeah, that's a big deal in a lot of repairs.
Yes, it is. Especially back then in a little small Texas town. So, but the airship that they realized was too damaged to determine what it was. And they couldn't determine what its means of propulsion was either. However, among the windmill debris was the strange metal that the airship was made of. No one knew what the metal was, but said it was heavy and seemed to be a mix of aluminum and silver. The metal, along with the windmill debris, was cleaned up and dumped into a nearby well, which is very smart. Let's take this foreign metal from another planet and dump it in our drinking water.
Yeah.
Where it remained for many years until the well was capped. And as for the strange pilot, it was determined that he would receive a Christian burial in a nearby cemetery, where his remains allegedly still reside to this day. However, the exact plot where he was buried now is a mystery because I think they've moved it several times because people kept vandalizing it.
So what it is that used to, because like whenever I was way younger back in BC, I went. I actually, some friends and we would go out there, and up until I guess the mid 80s, that they actually had a marker, but the actual gravestone kept being stolen. They just kept stealing this grave marker. So then they decided they would disinter and then reinter him into another spot. Now, my dad used to know one of the people who was a caretaker out there. And so because he knew him, I would go out there and like, hey, I need a little information,
Take me where he's at. Yeah.
And they finally decided that they would put a marker as a big stone over where, and it's a large stone, over where he's alleged to be buried now. Initially, he was said to be interred under a tree. And then now it's not so much. It's under this big rock. Now, whether or not the guy actually told me the truth, who knows? Who knows if there's anything still buried there? Someone could have stolen the remains. I do know where the rock is in the cemetery, and there actually is a historical marker at the entrance of the cemetery itself, denoting this. One of the biggest things about this story was that the Dallas Morning News picked it up. The Dallas paper reported on some little podunk town up here in North Texas, and so that alone caused quite a frenzy. That a big paper was reporting on this small town incident. That's really what kind of gave it some legs, and kind of what made it more well known than it normally would have been.
Well, and then you got the looky-loos coming up from Dallas. Hey, where's that damn alien at?
Yes,
yes.
He ain't from around these parts.
Needs to go back to where he came from. Back to Mars.
Back to Mars.
So there used to be a crude makeshift tombstone, like Shelley was saying, at the alleged burial site. But it's since been moved, and while the story has grown legs in later years, it's still nebulous as to whether it actually happened at all. Depending on who is questioned about the Aurora incident, it either did or didn't happen. And while there is evidence in favor and opposing the story, it's permeated culture and ingrained itself in Texas lore and in ufology itself. And while we may never know the truth of the Aurora incident, it still remains one of the most prolific UFO sightings in Texas.
I will tell you, I would definitely on that one vote on the side of that it was legitimate. Because again, for the Dallas newspaper, which was one of the biggest ones to show up and try to cover this story, that's a big deal. However, fun little fact, you can't find any of the old archives from that day because the City Hall, I believe it burned.
Yeah, Daniel told us that burned.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at one point, it also, either prior to burning or the new one that was built, flooded. So anything that was left is gone. It's gone. So there's like zero record of anything that might have been in those historical archives. Convenient.
And I believe too, but I think back in the 70s, there was a guy, he was kind of like a treasure hunter, and he found some of that metal and had it sent off for analysis. And
that's correct.
It came back that there was something kind of weird about it. And he wanted to, and before that, the town was pretty like, oh, gung ho about, oh yeah, cool little story. And he wanted to exhume the body. And then after that, the town was like, nope, they clammed up.
Here's the thing. They're very possessive of Ned. And that's what they've named him as Ned. They're very protective of him. And locals that do still know exactly where he is, they will not tell you. You have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knew where it was. I mean, that's how convoluted it is. If you really want to figure out. And if you just come and you just want to look, they are not going to tell you a thing. So
no. Well, the nice thing is we do know somebody.
We do know somebody.
Who knows somebody who knows somebody.
Who knows? Right.
You got to take us to it one of these days.
We're going to go find Ned.
So while there were more minor sightings after the Aurora incident, things tend to quiet down on the UFO front in Texas until the years after World War II. Now, during World War II, the U.S. gained nuclear weapon capabilities and needed a place to store weapons. So, in 1947, the military built a facility to store part of the U.S. nuclear arsenal just outside of Fort Hood at a place called Killeen Base. That was so top secret. And as we've all heard from countless UFO stories, for some reason, UFOs tends to show up around nuclear testing sites and nuclear storage facilities. And if you want an in-depth story on that, go back and listen to the Rendlesham Forest episode that we did a few years ago, talking about like one of the biggest UFO sightings around a nuclear base of all time. Now, Killeen Base was no exception to this rule about UFOs showing up around nuclear storage facilities. Shortly after the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission built the facility and packed it full of atomic goodies, the UFOs began to show up. At 8:20 p.m. on March the 6th, 1949, a sergeant and a private witnessed an oblong blue and white object move in from the north and pass directly above the nuclear storage facility, which set off alarm bells among soldiers patrolling the base that night. Because you're seeing something strange over the nuclear storage facility, that is cause for alarm.
Well, they're going to be keeping a very, very keen eye over that airspace.
Absolutely. So several patrol teams responded to the sighting above the facility and saw the exact same object, but it got even stranger from there. About 1:30 a.m. on March the 7th, an MP named Max Manlove out on patrol saw an orange teardrop-shaped object drop out of the sky right in front of him and instantly disappear, leaving him absolutely puzzled. The next night on March the 8th, two infantrymen completely separate of each other reported seeing strange lights over the highly restricted nuclear bomb storage facility. However, both men described seeing entirely different objects. The first described seeing a whitish light, while the other said he saw a lemon-shaped yellowish red light. A strange detail from two different perspectives, almost as if it was presenting itself differently depending on who was observing it. These reports from these soldiers were serious enough for the Army to start investigating. They did not like the fact that whoever or whatever it was sniffing around their nuclear stockpile. So they began to look into the matter. But while they did, more reports of strange sightings began to pour in, which worried the Army even further. On March the 17th, Captain Horace McCullough thought he would try to get to the bottom of what the men were seeing out in the field. In his mind, the whole thing was absolute nonsense. He thought they were just seeing military flares.
Mm-hmm.
So he decided to drop flares and put his men in strategic points around the base to observe them and radio into him what they looked like as he was doing the experiment. But before he could even shoot off any of his flares, at 7:52 p.m., the men radioed in and reported seeing red, green, and white lights flying in a straight line directly over the base. This absolutely dumbfounded the captain. Whatever was flying around the base clearly was not flares. With all the sightings and info gathered from Captain McCullough's failed hypothesis, the base commander at Fort Hood came up with a plan. To have 4-man teams placed in strategic locations around the base with tools to measure the altitude and speed of any strange objects they witnessed in the sky. And when they spotted one of these, they were to radio to a command post with information about the sighting and the measurements that they had gathered. And if multiple teams saw an object, the command post was to triangulate its position and make a report to the higher-ups about just what everybody was seeing. The first night that the team was tested was May 7th, 1949. The teams of observers got into position, but didn't have to wait long for the phenomenon to kick off. At about 7:40 p.m., the observers spotted an object traveling about 1,000 feet over the base. The shape of the object was a diamond-shaped craft, and when observers at the command post triangulated the strange object, they calculated that it was moving at about 1,300 miles per hour, which was an astonishing speed for an aircraft at that time. Because you have to remember, this is like right after World War II.
Right.
They're still developing jet engines and stuff like that. They have them, but they're nowhere near as fast as 1,300 miles per hour. Especially an aircraft with no wings or visible means of propulsion. So nothing can move that fast that doesn't have any wings or propulsion, according to them.
That they were aware of at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The object moved over the base, but was only visible for about 57 seconds. However, when it showed up the next night, it stuck around for quite a while longer. On May the 8th, several observers spotted what seemed to be the same object from the previous night, flying about 1,600 feet above the base. But this time, it was visible for about 9 minutes.
Well, that cheeky little bastard showing off. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's like, what's up, y'all? And it did something rather strange. The entire time it was visible, it caused radio interference and made the radios on base go completely haywire. But once the object was no longer visible, the radios returned to normal and functioned as if nothing was ever wrong. The military brass were absolutely perplexed. Who or what was doing this? They simply did not know. But the men remained vigilant and on the lookout for anything suspicious. They waited a few nights, and it wasn't long before another object reared its ugly head. At 9:05 p.m. on June the 6th, the observers in their stations saw a glowing orange craft about 30 to 70 feet wide, hovering a mile off the ground a few miles south of their position. They watched the object for about 3 minutes, and as it moved across the horizon, it suddenly exploded into a shower of particles puzzling the men who witnessed it. They had no idea what they had seen. This thing literally exploded and just dissipated.
So wait a minute. So of course we know whenever UFOs or UAPs have been reported, there's 99% of the time you hear about some kind of electrical interference or instrument interference, compass interference, that kind of thing. But I really, you've been describing so far most of these that have been cited so far in Texas as being orange.
That is weird.
I did not realize that. I mean, I don't recall really any other sightings. Under the Roswell sighting, it wasn't orange. So that's an unusual little detail that these Texas ones are being described as orange. And then I did not know the shower of particles. I didn't realize that was part of that story, that it kind of exploded and fell into. But the orange, that's something I did not know.
Yeah, and it seems to make no sense that, because everything they'd seen seemed to have been solid this entire time, going over the base, flying back and forth, and all of a sudden this thing just decides to explode. I mean, for what reason? And it just disappears after it explodes. Like there's no wreckage left behind. There's nothing. Yeah,
I think it's actually interesting because I actually had a picture that you don't cover this story because there's not really a story to it. But when I went to go research for like pictures and kind of stuff to like put up and put it in the marketing and trailer and all that stuff in the opener, I came across one that was in Jacksonville in East Texas, and you're talking about the orange shaped type stuff. And this is actually caught from, they said, was Google Street View.
Okay.
But it is also orange.
Oh, wow.
That is so odd.
I know. That's what's strange. And now this is, as I said, this is in Jacksonville, Texas, allegedly.
I know right where that is.
Yeah, which is just south of me by maybe an hour or so. And but this, like I said, was a Google Street View that had been snapped from the Google car, as it, shit. And it's interesting that you keep talking about all this orange, and this is an actual picture of one that is in like an orange-ish color, red color. I wonder why over Texas, because when we cover other cases, it's blue, it's white, it's
silver.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I think they're trying to pander to the Texas fans. I think that's what it is.
Is that what it is? They're like, oh, they got that UT down there. Let's hear. Flip on the orange lights, Ned.
We come in peace. Where is the barbecue? Let us tailgate with you.
Frogs. Purple, go frogs. No, purple, go frogs.
And I will say that picture that I just showed, the Google Street View, I did read into that one because, Ryan, you're not covering the one over Jacksonville.
No.
But I did read into that one. They actually could not explain it. They thought at first it was a possible lens flare, maybe, but they could not explain how the lens flare had happened.
Right.
Based on the position of where this was. Now, I don't know if it's still on Google Street View, and I don't know exactly what view they had.
They've probably erased it at this point.
Oh, I'm sure
someone
that they have.
Like, what are you doing?
I'm sure that they have. They're like, no, take that down.
Yeah. No.
Somebody just said it's a reflection from the Whataburger sign. Yeah, probably.
You know what?
Probably. I would actually believe that.
Whoever said that, you're very smart. And
that was Ed.
Ed, you know what? That's a very likely thing. Good job.
Whataburgers are everywhere here. We know that.
All over the place.
It could have been a reflection from Whataburger. You're absolutely right. That totally explains it right there. Debunked. Thanks, Ed.
So when this object suddenly exploded into a shower of particles, it puzzled the men who witnessed it. They had no idea what they had seen, and nothing logical seemed to fit with anything else that they had seen while observing the phenomenon over at Fort Hood base. And after that incident, the Army threw up their hands and were like, look, we're done with this. We are not looking into this any further. And they stopped investigating odd occurrences around Killeen Base, Fort Hood, or anywhere else, and deferred to the Air Force, who took up the mantle with Project Blue Book in the 1950s. Now, as for what the men at Fort Hood saw, it's still a mystery to this day. But the fact remains that something downright strange happened in Killeen. Now, while the rash of UFO sightings in Fort Hood had been a military issue that one outside of the service would not be aware of, a few years later in North Texas, there was a mass sighting by civilians on a pretty large scale on August the 25th, 1951. A large formation of V-shaped lights were seen passing over Lubbock. A young college student named Kenneth Davis and his girlfriend were some of the first to see these lights that evening. They were hanging out at a drive-in movie that night when Davis saw something strange crest over the horizon. A large formation of yellow lights in a giant V formation moved across the night sky as Davis and his girlfriend watched. The giant object moved over them and flew out of sight. The couple couldn't believe what they saw, but returned to their movie after the lights were out of view. They thought their sighting was over. However, about an hour and a half later, the lights returned, and this time they were going in the opposite direction. The couple was dumbfounded and didn't know what these lights were. A few miles down the road, a group of professors from Texas Tech just happened to be outside having a night outside in the backyard. And they also saw the object traverse the sky not once, but twice. Being men of science, they immediately tried to figure out just how high the object was and just how fast it was moving.
You know exactly what it was, right? It was Ned with his wife up there, and she was like, "You just missed our turn," and he had to like turn around and go back.
You put the yellow lights on, turn on the orange lights. So they couldn't figure out what it was, but they agreed it was massive and was about 9 miles high up in the air. And in order to cover the amount of sky that it moved across in the brief amount of time that they saw it, they also determined that it had to be moving at about 18,000 miles per hour. Now, after the professor saw it, yeah, this thing was moving fast.
I don't guess I ever have heard that about Lubbock lights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it was moving pretty quick. So now after the professor saw it, it flew off into the night, but the craft wasn't done. 5 days later, on August the 30th, Carl Hart Jr. was in his room, laying on his bed and looking out his window at about 11:30 that evening. Hart saw the huge amount of lights which appeared to shoot across the sky, and Hart couldn't believe his eyes. So he jumped out of his bed to go grab his camera and try to get a picture of the lights. But by the time he got back to the window, the lights were gone. However, much to his amazement, a little while later, it passed over his house again. And this time, he was able to snap a picture. The next morning, Hart got his pictures developed and took it to the local newspaper. The paper was super excited because for them, this was a godsend. They had received numerous calls that evening about the subject. So they ran the story on the lights using Hart's pictures, and the story got picked up and appeared in news outlets around the globe, focusing the world's attention onto the creeped out Texas town, which naturally got the attention of the United States Air Force and their newly christened Project Blue Book. So they sent an investigator down to Lubbock to interview witnesses and look at Hart's pictures. And after the investigators finished, they concluded the whole incident had been caused by migratory birds.
What the?
Yeah. Now, I don't know about you, but I have never seen migratory birds glowing at night moving at 18,000 miles per hour over a city.
No.
Well, and migratory birds, usually they're going one way. They don't usually turn around and come back.
No.
They're going one direction for a reason.
No, exactly. They're trying to go south.
Yeah.
And so clearly the military was trying to dismiss something they couldn't explain. But the fact remains something of unknown origin made several passes over Lubbock and was seen by thousands of people, whether the military wants to admit it or not. But the Lubbock lights caused a major stir amongst the citizens of Texas and the Air Force. But this wasn't the last time that the Lubbock Metro would be the focus of the UFO world.
We're going to get Ned some MapQuest directions, though. I mean, he just keeps going back and forth over the things.
Especially over Lubbock. There's so many places to be in Texas
to see there.
other than Lubbock.
Sorry, Lubbock. You know what you are.
Yes. Dusty and boring. Sorry.
Damn, right? Don't be making fun of our fellow Texans like that.
I'm sorry.
They
I'm sorry.
know what they are.
They know. They know, and they want to get out of Lubbock too.
Yeah.
They don't want to be there. Now, on November the 2nd, 1957, the focus would turn to Levelland, Texas, a small town about 40 minutes to the west of Lubbock. That evening started out like any other night for 911 dispatcher A.J. Fowler. But around 11 p.m., his switchboard began to light up like a Christmas tree. And Fowler answered one of the calls. And on the other end of the phone was a 32-year-old man named Pedro Saucedo. Now, Saucedo told the dispatcher that he and his friend had been out riding on Highway 114 that evening. when from out of nowhere, an extremely bright object appeared right over his truck, which caused his headlights to die and the truck to shut off immediately, as if something had just shut off all the electrical components in the engine.
Yep. Nope.
The two men watched the... Yeah, I know. Nothing.
Nope.
Something stopping you like that? Sorry.
Nope.
The two men watched the extremely bright, glowing yellow torpedo-shaped object fly over their truck, so they got out to get a better look at it. But when they did, the heat from the craft was so unbelievably intense that they hit the ground to shield themselves, but the object continued on its path. And as it left the area, the truck's headlights came right back on, and the two men got back in the truck, and it started right back up as if nothing had ever happened to it. Saucedo and his friend decided they needed to call their strange encounter into the local police, so they drove to the nearest payphone and called it in. Now, Fowler thanked Saucedo for his call and put it down in his call log, but he didn't dispatch any officers because it was Saturday night, and Saucedo thought, and Fowler thought that Saucedo was absolutely tanked. So he was like, "Yeah, thank you for your call. That's cool. Whatever. Lights in the sky. All right." So he wrote it down in his little logbook.
He's like, "No, you don't understand. They're not from around these parts.
They got to go and get. They ain't from around
now,
here."
let me ask you a question. Didn't Saucedo actually report that he actually had some burning? He had some burns that appeared on his skin.
I didn't see that, but he very well may have. I know
I might be confusing it with another one.
You might, because there is a story where there is a similar situation where somebody does have burns on their skin.
Probably confusing it.
You're totally fine.
I also find it really interesting that a lot of these Texas ones, just like the color, a lot of these Texas ones versus what we've talked about in the past on this podcast, are this oblong shape.
Yeah, they do.
Not so much. I mean, like we've had a couple, mentions of saucer, but nothing like
more cigar shape.
Yeah, like cigar shape seems to be more of that shape than it is round.
It does, and if they pretend to be particularly hot, it seems they tend to be for some reason.
That's the Texas sun. We know what that is. Yeah, we totally get it. We get it, Ned. We get it. Your ship is just overheating. It happens to our cars every year.
The time.
Oh my God! I have to keep antifreeze in mind because if you sit at a stoplight, it'll start to
listen. If Ned would just hover over, Central Texas or something, you can bake cookies right on your dashboard.
Yes, you can. So, like I said, Fowler thought that Saucedo was tanked, right? So he just wrote it down in his book and just kind of poo-pooed it and was like, whatever, people out drinking tonight, nothing's going on. But about an hour later, he received another call from a man named Jim Wheeler, who said he was out driving down the same stretch of road that Saucedo had called in about. And Wheeler said as he was driving, he saw a strange glowing egg-shaped object sitting in the middle of the road, spanning about 200 feet wide across the path. It was the damnedest thing that he had ever seen. And as he got closer to the object, his car completely died and slowed to a stop. So he, like the previous two, stepped out of his car to see exactly what the object was.
Why do you get out of your car?
Yeah, no,
I think, these are rough and tumble West Texas dudes who were just like,
they're like, I better see what the hell's going on.
They all have pew-pews and they shoot at things that they don't understand that are in there.
Exactly.
They don't recognize.
That's what happens in Texas.
Like, what the hell's this? Let me get out of my car and see what this is.
We actually do that, people. We do.
Yeah. We do. Yeah, we do.
Except for me, I hit the damn gas. I ain't getting out to look at it. No. If I see an egg-shaped object in the middle of the road, bye-bye. So anyway, he stepped out of his car to see exactly what the object was. But as he did, the object rose up into the air and blipped out of existence, completely disappearing. As soon as it was gone, Wheeler's car started right back up, and he continued on his way. Now, Fowler logged this call as well, but became more concerned because this was the second call he got in that evening about something strange happening in his vicinity. And Fowler then received another call. This time, it was a man calling from a location about 11 miles north, claiming he had had a similar encounter that was just like the other two previous callers. So Fowler couldn't ignore it any longer. So he put a call out to the officers out patrolling the area and called the sheriff to let him know what was going on. It was late in the evening, but the sheriff knew he was needed, so he hopped into action and drove towards his town to see if he could put a finger on just what was happening. But just then, his deputy and 2 state troopers saw a flash and a fiery object streak across the sky. Clearly, something strange was taking place. As the officers were driving around and trying to track whatever it was, traversing the skies over Levelland, it made itself known to a young truck driver named Ronald Martin. At about 12:45 a.m., as he was just outside of Levelland, on Highway 114, his headlights went out, and his truck completely died. Suddenly, in front of his truck, a giant fireball ascended from the sky and landed on the highway, lighting up the entire road in front of him. As he sat in his truck, he was absolutely gobsmacked and too terrified to move. He watched the object turn blue, rise up into the air, turn back into a fireball, and shoot directly up into the sky. No one could explain just what he had seen. But with all these citizens and police officers seeing lights appear in front of them and crisscross the night sky, the sightings gained the attention in high places that it needed, and West Texas Congressman J.T. Rutherford had heard about the incidents and was very concerned about his constituents and about the unexplainable phenomenon.
Of course he was.
For all he knew, yeah, exactly. For all he knew, it was a foreign power flying experimental aircraft over Texas skies, and he wasn't having that.
Welcome to Texas.
What the hell was he going to do about it?
Right.
Welcome to Texas.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what he did.
Oh,
he wrote
had
a
a plan,
strongly
did he?
worded letter to the Pentagon.
Oh, okay. So
Excuse me, sirs or madam.
Search for madam.
Can you tell me exactly just what the hell was flying over my district on this night?
Probably not too far off.
That
Right.
is the difference, folks, in Texas. Some get out of their vehicle, others write letters.
Strongly worded letters. Probably with a
Strongly
few
worded.
expletives in it, too. Just like, now,
Think
what was this sumbitching thing in the fucking sky on Tuesday? So,
If fireball came down in the
Allegedly.
middle of the road, and if not from these parts.
Allegedly.
he wrote the Pentagon, boy, I tell you what, a goddamn fireball came out of the sky on Tuesday right in front of me and Bobby as we were driving down the highway.
All right, Hank.
so
Damn.
anyway, he wrote the Pentagon, right? And he demanded that they give him an explanation on what happened in Levelland.
Settle down, Congressman.
Yeah, the Pentagon pretty much said as much. The Pentagon wrote him back about 2 weeks later and said the Air Force had done a thorough investigation and determined that the witnesses that night had in fact seen ball lightning caused by storms in the area. But there was only one problem with this explanation. According to weather data, there were no storms in the area that night, and a ridge of high pressure had formed over that part of Texas, making it virtually impossible for storms to form.
I believe that part of Texas was also in a drought at
Yes.
that time, if I remember the story correctly.
Exactly.
So-
And it's dusty out there.
I'm sorry, but somebody put in the comments, they said they were gobsmacked, flim flam, damn bamboozled.
Absolutely.
Ryan, you and those words. Oh my goodness.
So once again, the military was lying and
Allegedly.
about what it knew. So what people saw that night remains a mystery. But with the law enforcement element to back up the facts and substantiate stories, trained observers offer a level of credibility and believability to incidents like the Levelland sightings. And we always say on this show,
Right.
when you have a
That-
trained
yeah.
observer, that does add credibility to it because you have people who are trained to observe and report on exactly what they see. And
Well, and the time period we're in at this point, I mean, you have people going on record saying this is what I saw. You're
Right.
putting your job at stake, being this trained observer, this sheriff,
Absolutely.
the sheriff or this deputy, type level of something. You're putting it down and signing your name to a report. So to me, that always adds a whole different level of
I
credit.
agree
Right.
with that.
Absolutely, because in this time period, people are like, okay, yeah, little green men, you're absolutely crazy. Let's send him to desk duty. He doesn't need to be patrolling anymore.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yep.
now in 1965, 2 more police officers would experience something extraordinary in the skies over Damon, Texas.
Mm.
That September, Brazoria County Sheriff's Deputy Bill McCoy and his friend and colleague Bob Good were 2 very well-known good police officers, and they were highly respected in their community. They were not men to BS anybody. And if they said something happened, it happened, and you best believe it was the gospel truth. So when they said they had an encounter, people believed them. On the night of September the 3rd, McCoy drove over to the high school in the small town of Sweeney in an official capacity to check out the big football game. Now, while he was there, he ran into Good, who was at the game working crowd control that night. As he was talking to Good, McCoy realized that Good was visibly uncomfortable and that he had a few fingers wrapped up. So McCoy looked down and asked him exactly what had happened. And Good said that earlier in the day, a baby alligator had gotten into his garage, and when he went to get it out, the alligator bit his finger pretty bad. But he had to work that night, so he just slapped a bandage on it and came out to work the game. But while he had McCoy's attention, Good asked him if he would ride out with him on his route that evening. And McCoy, being a good friend, agreed. So after the game, the two deputies went out on patrol. And about 11 p.m. that evening, out near Damon on Highway 36, the pair spotted something unusual. Hovering over a nearby field, they spotted a pulsating purple light that they first dismissed. Yeah, this time it's purple. Prince was out there. They spotted a pulsating purple light that they first dismissed as a light from a nearby gas well. But then a blue light came out of the purple one, and the men knew right then that they had something else on their hands.
Ball lightning.
Yeah. So the deputies pulled the car over and watched the purple light hover while the blue light flew circles around it. The pair were curious about what they were seeing, so they drove in the direction of the mystery lights and stopped again about a mile from where the lights were spotted. Suddenly, the patrol car filled with purple light, and the men looked up and saw the purple light right over the top of them. But the light wasn't just a light. It was attached to a football field-sized giant gray object. And Officer Good had his injured hand out the window and felt heat on the injury that he had on his hand that he was hanging out the window. And they felt heat coming down from the object, so the officers hit the gas pedal and pushed their vehicle as fast as it could go towards Damon. The object didn't give chase, but moved back towards the San Bernard River and shot up at a 90-degree angle, disappearing into the heavens that evening. The two men had no idea just what they had seen, so they rocketed into town and stopped to try to get their bearings. But ultimately, the two decided that they needed to nut up and go back out into the country looking for the lights, which they found again on Highway 36.
God help me with the comments.
But they decided that they needed backup and that someone else needed to see this. So they went and got a few other officers and a local judge to come take a look. But by the time they got out there, the lights were gone. So the two men went back to town and had breakfast and discussed the night's events. McCoy cracked a joke with Good and said, "Well, I bet that made you forget about your finger hurting." Good said, "That's the thing. It doesn't hurt anymore. It isn't sore." So he unwrapped his bandage, and the finger that was bitten by the alligator wasn't swollen or irritated anymore. And by the next morning, it was completely healed. Had the UFO healed his finger? Good couldn't wrap his head around it. But the pair's brush with high strangeness wasn't over in the slightest. A few days later, on September the 5th, a group of strange men showed up in town, looking for Good and McCoy. McCoy was out of town, but the men got a hold of the sheriff's office, and the dispatch called Good in to come and talk with these strange individuals. So Good drove to a nearby cafe in West Columbia to meet with them. And he got there first and waited on the men to show up. As the two strange individuals walked into the cafe, they stuck out like sore thumbs. They wore black suits and derby hats and were small and tan. Strangers to this part of Texas, indeed. They approached Deputy Good and introduced themselves as reporters from Pasadena. They told Good exactly what had happened to he and McCoy that night as if they were there, which was extremely odd because the two men had been nowhere near where McCoy had had his experience. They also told Good that he and McCoy should not have been afraid, and if they weren't afraid, they could have taken a ride in the UFO. But if the deputies...
Wait,
yes,
what? Okay, go ahead.
But if the deputies ever told what they saw, the strange men would return and make them look like, quote, jabbering idiots. Good left the meeting even more puzzled. Who were these strange little guys, and how did they know about the sightings? In the following day, Good and McCoy called every media outlet in every Pasadena across America to see who had sent the strange men. And every outlet had no idea what they were talking about. Just another strange wrinkle in this strange story. And Good and McCoy never had another encounter, but they never forgot that late summer night when they came face to face with something otherworldly.
So,
just like,
is this the first Texas Men in Black sighting?
I don't know. This was the only one that I found that had a Men in Black sighting correlating with what they seen. Okay. Now, I find this one extremely interesting because you have an injury being healed, you have Men in Black showing up, and you have these Men in Black showing up and telling them exactly what had happened as if they were there. That's strange because, and then you have these guys who are these very respected cops in the community that are going on the record, and they're talking about not only a UFO sighting, they're talking about being healed, and they're talking about Men in Black showing up. So they're looking like triple crazy at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think they did encounter something. I don't know what it was, but okay. I find that one extremely interesting.
I'll have to look that up if that was the first Men in Black sighting in Texas or not.
It may have been. I don't know.
I don't recall one before that. So
I just want to thank you for that lovely story and the use of "nut up" in the middle of that story. I had to mute my mic for just a second because our comments just lost it for a second.
Yeah,
sometimes you got to.
Commenters, keep going. I love going back and reading them later.
I haven't broke in quite a long time, but that got me.
Who's your culprit tonight in the comments?
Who's your culprit? I can only imagine.
I've got a few. I've got a few.
Okay.
Now, that night, they had an encounter with something otherworldly, just like the people in our next story and our very last story of the evening. On Monday, December the 29th, 1980, 51-year-old Betty Cash and her friend 57-year-old Vicki Landrum and Vicki's 5-year-old grandson Colby went out looking for a fun evening. Betty and Vicki really wanted to go play bingo. But bingo was usually on Tuesday nights, and because it was the holidays, the ladies got their dates mixed up and accidentally went out on a Monday evening instead. So when they got to their usual bingo spot over in Cleveland, it was closed. But the undeterred trio drove to New Caney, trying to see if they could catch another bingo game. But when they arrived...
wait a minute, New Caney, just so you know,
is...
So it goes New Caney, then Bullard, then Jacksonville, and that's all in East Texas. You're still on the same road, just so you know.
Oh, wow, really? I didn't know that.
Yes. I go through New Caney to go see my friend who lives in Bullard, and Jacksonville is where we go when we have to go to the store because she's way out in the country.
So you got Jacksonville and New Caney.
Yes.
All right, so they decided to drive. Well, when they got to New Caney, the place that they wanted to go play bingo was locked and dark. So they decided to drive to a nearby truck stop and get a bite to eat before they went back home to Dayton. Is Dayton pretty close to there too?
I don't recall. I may have that wrong. Time out. I may be thinking of CUNY, not New Caney. Huh?
I think, yeah.
I think I'm thinking of CUNY. My mistake.
Okay.
My apologies. I missed
Here, hold on. I'm telling you, this is how big Texas is. We don't even know where some of these cities are at. New Caney is just north of Houston.
Okay.
Okay. So sorry, I was thinking of CUNY. My apologies.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was about to say you. Yeah. No. I was like,
no, don't let me be stupid. Correct me, please.
Well, that's why I was. I mean, we do live Google searches and shit all the time. So.
Hey man, we got to figure out where these places are.
I thought that New Caney was down in towards Houston, but I wasn't quite sure. So yes, down towards you, just north of Houston.
Right, because it's close to Dayton and close to Cleveland.
Yeah.
All right, so they had a good little dinner and discussed their failed evening plans. And soon it was time to go back home. So they left the truck stop and began their journey back through the piney woods of East Texas down Farm Road 1485. Around 9 p.m. that evening, the trio noticed an extremely bright light behind the trees that kept disappearing and reappearing. And while strange, the ladies dismissed it as, just landing lights from planes coming into the Houston airport. Coming behind the trees. They were like, whatever. They're logical older women. They're like, it's just planes landing. It's whatever. That was until a few minutes later when they spotted the light right in the middle of the road, directly in front of them. It was the same light that they had seen following them through the dark Texas woods, but they realized the light wasn't just a light. The light was emanating from some sort of craft that was diamond in shape and ringed with small blue lights. Betty saw the craft in her path and slammed on the brakes, which made Vicky lurch forward and put her hand out onto the dash to stop herself. But the object in front of them was putting off so much heat that when Vicky removed her hand, she left behind an imprint of her handprint in the dash.
So the dash was hot enough that it became malleable and it was soft.
Yes.
Damn.
So she touched it and like pulled her hand back, and there was a handprint from where she braced herself. After Vicky let go of the dash, the car came to a complete stop, and the trio got out of the car to look at the object. Once again, what the hell's that?
Why?
You know.
We were told earlier it's kind of like, you know, turning down the radio to see better. You know, it it just helps.
They have a 5-year-old in the car. Why would you get out of the car?
Oh, I feel so bad for this little 5-year-old, by the way, and you'll see why in a minute.
Oh man, come on.
Oh, don't something happened to a kid, story, Ryan.
Kind of a little bit, more so to them, but something did happen to him too. So they immediately noticed a shrill beeping noise that hurt their ears, and noticed the object periodically spewed flames from the bottom. However, it was so bright, it was hard for them to look at it. And Colby began to freak out. He had seen enough, and he begged his grandma to get back into the car.
Yeah, get in the car, Grandma.
Get back in the car, stupid. What are you doing? Now, Vicky took Colby back to the car, but thought this object was a sign of the second coming of Jesus Christ. So to comfort herself and Colby, you know, you can tell yourself whatever you want to tell yourself when something like that happens. Oh, it's just Jesus. Oh, God. You know? So to comfort herself and Colby, she told him that Jesus was in the craft and he would never harm them. And meanwhile, Betty remained outside. Yeah, right.
No.
Oh, that's just Jesus in the craft. So Betty remained outside in absolute awe of what she was seeing. She watched the craft for another 5 minutes until she began to feel like her skin was on fire and she was burning from the inside. So she decided to get back into the car. But when she grabbed the door handle, it was so hot that she had to put her coat around her hand to even open the door. As she got back into the car, the trio decided it was probably a good time to get out of there. So Betty decided to start the car. But when she turned the key, it would not crank. So they were stuck there at the mercy of this object for an additional 20 minutes.
Don't worry, it was just Jesus.
Yeah, it was just Jesus irradiating you.
Irradiating.
Until it eventually began moving to the southwest. And as it moved further away, Betty's car suddenly started. And they were ready to get out of there. But before they did, several black helicopters swooped in and tried to surround the object. But the craft tilted and started flying in the direction of Galveston Bay with the helicopters in hot pursuit. Betty was finally able to hit the gas and get out of there. So she burned rubber and drove Vicky and Colby home and went back to her house. All of them promised each other that they would not speak of the incident. They just wanted to put the whole thing behind them and leave it in the rearview mirror. But all three would soon succumb to a strange sickness. That would make it impossible to deny that it had just happened. Once they got home that night, all three of them were stricken with an unquenchable thirst that nothing seemed to satiate. And soon, that gave way to severe nausea, headaches, vomiting, and diarrhea. Vicky and Colby began to suffer from diminished eyesight and felt severely sunburned. But Betty would suffer the worst of it. She'd been outside the car the longest and exposed to the craft for the most amount of time. So she quickly deteriorated to the point that Vicky had to drive her to the hospital. Where in the coming days, Betty suffered hair loss and multiple blisters all over her skin, along with a severely swollen face. Her face swelled up so much that her eyes swelled shut, and her daughter, who came to comfort her, didn't even recognize her. The doctors were baffled. They could not for the life of them figure out what was wrong with her. But finally, it was Colby who piped up and said, "I bet that thing we saw made us sick." Now that the cat was out of the bag, Betty told her doctor about the incident. Much to her surprise, the doctor believed her and referred her to a dermatologist who examined her and said she was suffering from radiation exposure.
That's exactly. I was like, that's exactly what that sounds like. Like,
right.
Damn.
Mm-hmm. And a radiologist looking at her record said she suffered damage from ionizing radiation with a possible infrared component. Betty took quite a while to heal from these wounds, and after she did, Betty would be diagnosed with breast cancer and fight it for years to come. Vicky would develop severe cataracts in one eye, and Colby would suffer from severe PTSD. Their ailments and medical bills caused them to get in touch with their local congressman and ask him for assistance. Now, the congressman told them to file a complaint with the judge advocate of the Air Force. So, in August of 1981, all three met with him at Austin-Bergstrom Air Force Base, which is actually the airport that I fly out of in Austin.
Yep.
So that was the former Air Force Base. So it's kind of cool that they met there and had this discussion
last weekend.
Mm-hmm. So they told their story to the judge advocate and talked about the black helicopters and what they had seen at the scene of the incident. And the judge listened intently and suggested that they lawyer up and seek compensation from the government. So they did and filed suit. But the case drug on for years, and finally a district court judge threw the case out in 1986, and the three were left to suffer and deal with their own health issues. Their government failed them, but there was no doubt that, like so many others, they had a UFO experience deep in the heart of Texas.
Told you, we're trained.
So what do y'all think about that one? I mean, that's the end of UFOs over Texas.
I find that one interesting that that they actually like filed suit against the government.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly what they hope to accomplish with that, because number one, it's something that they couldn't prove.
Well, they did, but it's interesting that the Air Force judge essentially told them, "Hey, I think you have a case here. You need to file suit." That's pretty damn interesting.
That is interesting. But the fact is that they were never going to get the government to admit that there was something that was either tracked on radar, or photographed or anything in the sky.
No,
that was not of this world. Not
absolutely.
At that time. So
no,
I'm not exactly. That seems like that was a misguided, unless whoever this person that advised them to do such was actually on the side of making the information about UAPs, UFOs more widely known, and so was encouraging that to open a conversation.
Right. But you have to wonder too, though, if maybe publicly they kind of like shoved it out of court, but like privately they were like, here's some money, shut up, like stop talking about this.
I think that would have come out in the story somewhere if they would have been paid off in any way.
I mean,
because they suffered. You have a woman fighting breast cancer. You have a child who has PTSD. You have another lady who has now got cataracts so bad that she's essentially blind. That, I think, had they been given some modicum of compensation, I think that would have come out at some point.
It's a possibility, and I mean, unless they were told keep your mouth shut or we can make your life hell. Here's some money. Shut up.
They said what was happening to them.
They did.
They kept talking.
Hey, you're right, because I think there was like after it got thrown out, there was like an it was one of those. Remember how like Fox back in the day used to have the alien autopsy revealed? Like they would have like the spooky like specials every now and again. I believe there was one that they did in 1989 talking about that whole incident, and they were interviewed thoroughly on there. And I think it was on Unsolved Mysteries at one point too.
I believe you're correct.
So I mean that one is very interesting when you have like, there were no trained observers in that, but you have the medical perspective coming through and saying, hey, look, something did happen to these people. There's like, this is radiation poisoning. That's exactly what this is. But I hate that for them. I especially hate it, that she ended up dying of breast cancer in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. And
you're correct.
Colby, I didn't see if anything else happened to him, but I know he had severe PTSD, and he probably dealt with that the rest of his life.
Right.
So that's pretty rough, but I find that story interesting. So what do y'all think about UFOs over Texas?
Oh, they're out there. Oh, yeah, without a
Uh-huh.
doubt. Like I've had 2 experiences over Texas with UFOs, and then I have other family members who have experiences as well. I don't know why they want to come here, but
I don't know. Maybe because there's so much land that they can kind of cover and like not be bothered if they're out in the middle of nowhere.
Now, I just thought it was because we were strange to look at, but that's just me.
I mean, that's true too.
I don't know why they would want to come here, but Texas has a lot of, different things. Who knows? We've got some desert land. We've got some mountains. We've got the ocean. So I got a little bit of everything. So if they are looking for certain objects, items, things that potential for fuel, we got a nice big, patch of land to hunt in. I don't know, but there has to be something, because there are a lot of sightings in Texas. And in fact, the town I live in, I believe whenever Daniel and Jones was on with us, I think it was 2 days prior, my little town had a couple of sightings. Remember, we were like looking it up, saying that we were looking up the UFO sightings in Texas. And my little town, actually 2 days prior, had 5 or 6 people that had called and reported in the local police station there was something over our town. Now, what that was, I never found out. But I don't know, maybe it's just big enough.
Well, I think you're kind of onto something with it being so vast, because if you look at Texas as a whole, there's so many different environmental biomes. You have like the piney woods of the east, you have the hill country, you've got the deserts of the west, you've got the prairies of the north. Maybe you've got
the swamps in South Texas and the ocean, or
so maybe something is
Galveston Bay.
Yeah, down that way. So maybe the biodiversity of Texas is somehow attracting them for some reason. I think you might be onto something there. Who knows? But
I just think that they're like, we like to go to that one area on Earth because they like to try to shoot at us in the sky, and it gives us a chance to practice.
It gives them new pilot training.
Yeah, it's like the force shield training. They're like, all right, Ted's up next. He's got to go to Texas to get the force shield training. So have at it.
Son of a bitch, I want to go there. Them bastards shoot at me.
No, I think they just like our accents.
I know I've talked about these before, but we are doing UFOs over Texas. So I will tell very quickly my
go ahead, man.
Of what I have had happen to me. So the first one, if you've never heard these stories, awesome. If you have, bear with me. The first one, I was probably around, I think it was 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that time. I wasn't driving yet. I know that. And I was riding with one of my friends. We went out to her house out in the middle of kind of nowhere. And we running in, she's grabbing change of clothes. We were going around and all this stuff. So we're like coming back out. We're looking up at the sky. And I see these 3 red dots flying in triangle formation, and I'm like looking up at them. And I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. That's cool. And then all of a sudden they all started to do figure eights like around each other. And I was like, that's not a plane. That is not a plane. That is not a helicopter. I don't know what that is, but I was like, we need to get the fuck up out of here. And so she saw him as well. I need to ask her about that. She saw him as well. And so we both went running off for a car. I mean, I was barely in the car and she was already like taken off. And anyway, so we hightailed it all the way back to civilization. So that was the first time. Second time, I was actually on the phone with y'all.
Yes.
You were.
Because this was back whenever I used to host do my portion of hosting from a different, area.
Right.
Before I got that good internet. And so I was driving home from the location I was doing it at, and I was coming down the road, and I remember telling y'all, I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, I just saw something like in the sky and whatever. So I like whipped the car around. I started
screaming at you, turn around.
Yeah, you were like, turn around. Yeah. I was like, I'm trying to find a way to turn around. So luckily there was a street that was like right there. So I flipped the bitch real quick. And I mean, y'all, it took me 10 seconds to get turned around. Like if that.
Not long at all.
Tire squeal.
Yeah. And by the time that I got turned around and facing where I saw it on my street in my neighborhood, by the way, that I still live in, it was gone. It was just this, I would almost say, car size object just above the houses by no more than 20 feet, maybe 15, 20 feet, something like that.
That's pretty damn low flying too.
It was pretty damn low flying, and it had all kinds of lights on it, all that stuff. You know what I mean? I did not get a good look at it because I did see it out of the corner of my eye. By the time that I kind of turned my head to look, I was like, I was passing by it, you know what I mean? So it's like, the fuck was that?
Right.
And so Shelly's like, turn around. And I was like, if I get abducted, I'm gonna hurt y'all, but okay.
I was like, but we know right where you are, so it's fine. We'll call the law. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
They'll catch it.
So yeah, that's my 2 personal experiences. I know that we have another one that goes with us investigating, and that she has seen one. But maybe we'll have her on to tell her own story at some point.
Well, and there was one night that we had. I don't know. We're very codependent. We talk on the phone almost every night. But I was on the phone with you guys one night, and I was sitting outside, and I remember that I was like, there is something weird in the sky. I'm looking at it, and it's like this snake-shaped kind of like light.
Wasn't it blue?
It was, yes, it was blue. It was a snake, and it just looked like it was snaking across the sky. And I sent you guys a picture of it, and y'all were like, we don't know what that is. Went and looked it up. It was actually the International Space Station was actually tracking in across the sky in our view. And I guess with the amount of yuck in the air that day, I don't know exactly, but that point it was in my view from where I was in the sky. So it was like a reflection. But yeah, I had to go look. I had to go research and dig it up. So it was that's what I think it was. Do I even want to know what they're saying in the comments?
They were just asking. You said it was, a snake like shaped, and all they asked was if it was throbbing. Did it have a throbbing light?
Who asked that?
Paul, you know who it is.
Paul, you naughty thing.
By the way, they said that on when you were telling me to turn around that you were making me the sacrificial lamb. So
you were fine.
I'm gonna tell you what.
I lived.
I don't know if have you guys ever seen Starlink?
Satellites? Yeah.
I freaked out one night.
First time I saw it. Yeah, I did too.
And I was like, what the fuck is that? I was on the phone with my uncle. I said, I don't know what that is. And I went and looked it up, and it was Starlink. And I was like, man, if you didn't know any better, you'd think that was something coming across the sky.
Because all you see is like, you start counting them, and you're like 15, 16. What the hell? Like,
what is that?
They're
what
all
even
in
is that?
Straight line. Just Yeah,
and they just come over and they finally disappear. But
yeah.
So I highly recommend going and reading this book, Texas UFO Tales. There were some things I didn't get to that were in this book that are really, really interesting. If you want to know more about some of these like smaller town UFO sightings, like I said, there's a lot in North Texas. There's a lot in West Texas. It's by Mike Cox and Renee Roderick. It's really, really good. Go check it out. So that was the source I used for that episode. But man, yeah, UFOs are out there. We've seen them.
We can't be the only ones that exist in this. We've said that so many damn times. We can't be the only ones that exist in this universe.
Absolutely not. I mean, where they come from, we don't know. Did they come from another dimension? Did they come from outer space? Are they from here? We don't know.
Well, if we're the smartest people in this universe, we are just screwed.
Yes,
and that's all there is to it.
We're absolutely screwed.
Well, I mean,
something else.
I just think that it's going to get closer and closer to being revealed more and more and more because, as we've said plenty of times, paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptids, whatever, more and more people have a camera in their hands nowadays.
Right.
And so just remember when it happens, guys, press record.
Well,
don't be like us.
I was listening, like Lou Elizondo.
and forget.
but you know Lou Elizondo, right? The guy who was, I believe he worked with the government. He worked with ATIP. He worked with other stuff. But anyway, he was very involved in some of this disclosure agreement stuff that came out. He's been doing the podcast rounds recently because he just wrote a book that's about to come out. And he was talking about how, because somebody asked him, like, why if everybody has a camera in their pocket, why are so many people not getting the pictures or videos of some of this stuff? And he's like, there's still some sort of, like this is your experience and you're not thinking about it because you're having this like very interesting experience and you're witnessing it. And the last thing you're thinking about is let me pull my camera out and record this or take a picture of this because you're like, what your brain is like, what the hell am I looking at?
Yeah. Your brain is being forced to be present in the moment, which most people have a very difficult time doing is being present in the moment they're in.
Right.
They're too busy with the phone in their hand or they're too busy, being distracted by 30 other things. It's very important to be present in the moment. And maybe in those moments, you're actually being forced to pay attention right now and focus on nothing but whatever it is that's directly above you.
And sometimes it's just for you. It's not necessarily for anybody else.
That is very true. The paranormal bubble. Sometimes only you are meant to see it, hear it, experience it.
Some people just aren't. What were you going to say, Blake?
I did like this comment that said that Shelly was making me the sacrificial lamb. It just says Shelly finds Blake out in a cornfield. Did you get some evidence?
Please tell me your phone was running.
Watch your butthole
because that's exactly how it would go. Shelly be like, so what? You got up in the aircraft. Did you get evidence? That's all I need to know.
Are they coming back? Did we make an appointment? I would. And then I'd be like, damn, what happened to your butthole?
That's what I say. Why's your butthole beeping? Why is that what's sticking out? Why is there a satellite back there?
It was strip poker. Shut up.
Did you win?
Of course. I always win. Wait, is it winning if you take off all your clothes or never mind.
Depends on what your kink is, and I don't claim.
Did they take a sample?
Take a sample.
And on that note, gentlemen, phone call territory, Patreon territory, we need to stop.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So with that, hey, Blake, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
Yeah, I sure will. Well, y'all remember that After Dark with EVP Season 1 and 2, all 8 episodes are out on Paraflix Paranormal Plus. We are getting ready to get going on Season 3, so that is getting ready to premiere. I do believe we have a premiere date of October 24th, 2024 at 7 or 8 p.m. I can't remember what we confirmed, but we'll get those details down for you. Don't worry. So Paraflix Paranormal Plus is available on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play. So make sure you use our link to sign up, which will be posted to our Facebook page tomorrow via our LINKTREE, and is also in the show notes for you audio listeners. Our code is After Dark 25 for 25% off an annual subscription. That means the whole year, like $37. That's going to be posted, like I said, to our Facebook page tomorrow morning via that LINKTREE, and in that link you will also find every social media channel we are on, our online merchandise store, our public investigations, and our Patreon page. Our Patreon page is the fastest and easiest way you can directly help support the show. For just $5 a month, you will gain access to over 400 additional Patreon exclusive videos. Your support from this goes directly to the show and all the ghostly adventures that we get to bring you week after week. That price will never change, and with that, you currently get our pre and post broadcasts, which are the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live broadcast, where we discuss things even further, fight, debate, act goofy, talk about anal probing, and share very personal things that we should never share on camera.
We're sorry.
That is also going to include our Patreon exclusive unedited investigation footage from places such as Squirrel Cage Jail, Hill House Manor, and many others. And we are getting ready to release some more of that. So if you've ever wanted to watch some full-length paranormal evidence, now's your chance. That is only on Patreon. And do not forget that we offer that 7-day free trial for our Patreon page, so you can check it out prior to purchasing. If you'd like to spend some time with us, we will be at the Rock Island Paracon on October the 5th. So we are about to start our marketing on that and showing you where you can get your tickets for that. So if you are up north, come out, see us, check us out, hang out with us, and say hey. But make sure you head over and follow us on all social media channels. Just search everything Vaguely Paranormal and look for the green sound wave. And remember, to those audio listeners, you can watch us live on Facebook and YouTube each and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. These are all the ways you can directly support everything Vaguely Paranormal, but we also appreciate your love and support for us. Those likes, comments, shares, views, and downloads. And remember, as always, any questions, comments, or stories you'd like to share with us, those can be submitted to us at the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Go like, share, and subscribe to that YouTube page.
All right. Absolutely. So for everything Vaguely Paranormal, my name is Ryan Roberts, and these are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Miss Shelley Pruitt. And we will see y'all next Tuesday.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.